Hi, I'm Steve Gompertz of QRx Partners, and welcome to this week's Quality Heretic. My topic for this week is about the differences between change management and document change management. Too often, again, like I talk about a lot of times, people who get terms confused. I do see these two things mixed up. Um, I remember sitting in an audit once, and the manager of the engineering department was, talking with the auditor, and the auditor was looking over, some changes that had been made to the device, and said, "Show me the record, where you captured, the design change, right? Because that's a requirement of the standards and the regulations." And their response was, "Oh, here's the ECO, which was used by our doc control process to manage moving documents from one rev to another." Um, and the auditor looked through it and said, "Well, all this is telling me is that you touched these five documents and rev them, but it doesn't really say what you did or why. I want to see the change description." And the engineering manager just kind of stared at him and went, "I gave you the ECO. That's the record." Right? And the auditor was trying to explain, but this tells me nothing. It just says you took certain actions without any indication of why you did it and what the outcomes were supposed to be. Okay, so great. You documented the fact that documents went from Rev A to Rev B with no context whatsoever. And that's the big difference here. What we're looking at is that when we're talking about change management, we're talking about setting some sort of goal, the why, right? We're trying to improve a process. We're trying to react to a negative trend, right? Some nonconformance trend. So we're trying to implement corrective actions, right? Or we're trying to do preventive actions to head off something. But there's some sort of overall goal we want to achieve. It could be to reduce the costs of certain parts, right? So we're going to refine the design or loosen up the tolerances or something like that, right? There's always an end goal, and that's what change management is about, right? Is figuring out how are we going to make sure we don't miss anything that needs to happen in order to realize that goal, right? Successfully. On the other hand, right, in order to get that done, you're going to have an action plan of some sort, and every one of those actions is going to end with the documentation, right? Because we all know that one. If it isn't documented, it didn't happen. So, right. So change gets manifested through documentation, but the changes in the documentation in and of themselves are not really the change, right? The change is broader than that, and right. Um, on the other side, then doc change management is about the how. How do we get the work done in order to get to the goal, right, that we're trying to achieve overall? And you really need to separate. They're two different stories, but obviously they're connected, right? But doc change management is a subset of overall change management. And that's why in change management, we talk about having like a quality plan, right? A project plan of some sort that says there's a bunch of things that are going to go on, and that project, right, should have goals. I hope that's what you're doing, right? That you're not just willy-nilly, making changes because you talked about it, right? Again, it's like anything else, there should be a really good plan. And then as part of that, part of the actions identified are going to be, we're going to need to update these documents. The engineering drawing is going to have to get updated, the inspection procedure, the manufacturing procedure, whatever, right? We're going to have to come up with a new test protocol, which means there's going to be a test report. We're going to have to go back to our risk analyses and update those. Right, all of these things are manifestation through the documented information that fall under document change management, but they all happen to support the goal of the change, right? Which has to be documented in some way to create the context for managing all those document changes. So this is a quick one this week, but it's important to keep those two things separate. I'll also say that, when you're putting together those document change management records, they not only should say we're taking this document from Rev A to Rev B, they need to be very specific in saying what we're going to change in those documents are these things, and we're doing that because that satisfies this part of the broader change management plan. So, as always, let's get some discussion going, and please leave your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you next week.